Okay, today we're going to take a look at how to create some gradients for planets. And essentially what we're trying to do is work with our gradients. And you can see this gradient here. If I open that, I'm going to get color, which is not what I want. I'm going to go to the gradient panel. So window gradient, and here it is. So the gradient essentially has a whole bunch of color stops in there, possibly more than I need. Let's experiment with these different things. We're also going to use a gradient for the background, for the sky, and I'm going to show you how to make a starry brush. So that's a new feature today, is we're making stars, a gradient sky, and some planets. A bit more next time on how to use gradients more constructively. So File, New, and in File, New, I'm going to choose Print. I'm going to choose Letter, and I'm going to make sure I go, it doesn't matter, picas, inches, pixels. I would go with inches or pixels, depending on what your preference is. Or what you might be doing it for. Now, the thing I goofed on that time is I really like to work landscape style, so I'm going to choose that again and switch to landscape. So I got landscape. So I got this. And first, I'm going to make layers. So here's a layer. I'm going to double click and rename it my sky. It'll have two things in it. I'm going to make another layer. I'm going to call it planets. Now, planets, of course, has to be on the top layer, so they'll be in front of the sky and actually visible. Let's go to the sky layer. I'm going to lock this other layer. So I've got sky selected. I'm going to get a rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead and just make a rectangle the same size as my thing. In fact, if I click on this and I choose once clicked, and I say, okay, width 11 by 8.5, it's going to make it exactly the same size as my canvas. Now, it's not centered, so if I go find my window and I look for control up at the top somewhere, here's control. I got this, and there's an align panel right there with it. So if I align to artboard and center it like this, I've got that. Now I'm also going to get rid of the stroke. So if I just choose this and say no stroke, or you could also choose the stroke down here and choose none. So to build this into a gradient, first I'm going to, at the bottom of my tool panel, you can barely see it right there, it says gradient. Way down here, I'm going to choose gradient there and click on it, and it opens up this gradient panel. So now I've got a gradient, and it's going to let me edit this as I see fit. Now let's talk about color briefly here. Let's set this up to be, I open it up and it says black and white. I'm like, no, I want color. So if I choose HSB and go to the blue section, okay, I'm going for a blue sky. I don't want to oversaturate this. I want to darken it up a little bit. So if I make it too saturated, then I'm going to get too much brightness, or it's going to be too intense. So I don't want to have a really intense color in there. I want to have a nice relaxed dark, because it's not the main player. It's a supporting actor, so its color is very important, but it should not be such a dominant color, which would be more saturated, more bright. It shouldn't be so dominant that it gets all the attention. So now I like that color, I think, for now. So what I'm going to do is copy that color, so I'm just going to drag this over. So to add or subtract these stops, the bottom side is for color. So I've got now, I just clicked on there, look at that, I just click on there and add one and drag it to remove. So I want this one, and I'm going to get rid of this one, and I'm going to change this to radial. Now I can't really see what's going on just yet, but let me open this up, and on this one, got to go back to HSB. I wish there was a way to set that as a permanent choice here. And I want to set this middle to be a little brighter, so more brightness, less saturation. Just trying to get a sky going on here that looks, they want it to look. Now, that looks okay, I guess. But I also want to make this not a perfect circle, because, I don't know, space has its own sort of ways of working things out. Never been there, so I'm making it up. Now I can take this color, this gradient slider, and move this left or right. Alright, so I can sort of slide that around this way. And I'm going to change the angle of the gradient so it's kind of tilted one way. And you can see that better if I stretch this down like this. So essentially I've got, let me get this brighter. Back to HSB, and let's go brighter. There we go. So now it's sort of offset, and if I go back to 100% aspect ratio, it's even, and if I reduce that this way, you're going to get different setups. So kind of fun to mess around with, depending on what part of space you're looking at. Again, I've never been there, so I'm making this up. I'm going to close that panel and call it good. So to build the stars in here, the way we make stars is there's a couple ways you could do it. The way I'm going to teach you now is I'm going to use the star tool. Amazing. Who saw that coming? And I'm going to use white fill on this. Okay. Now what just happened is I changed my gradient by selecting this. So if I unselect my shape and now change to white again, I'm not going to change that sky. So I'm going to use this to make a star with, and if I click on here, it wants to know how many points and how many, like how big are the radii. So radius 1 is the inner radius for the inner points that point inward, and radius 2 is the outer points. So you can mess with that as you see fit. I'm going to go with some weird number like 9 points, just because that's huge. And as you can see, there's a lot of distance between those points. I'm going to check this again and make the inner radius a little bit bigger. So maybe I'll go with 0.4. I don't know. Sure. Now I'm not going to use that big. I'm going to use it smaller, and I'm going to make it still. It's going to be wind up a little bit bigger than I want it to be. So I'm going to make the computer do some math for me with the brush I'm going to make. So we go Window, Brushes, and here's this brush panel. So if I drag this little shape into my brush panel, it like wants to make a brush. So it's going to put a brush right in there with the star shape in it. We're going to choose Scatter Brush, and the Scatter Brush has some fixed or random ways we can build this. I'm going to randomize the size, the spacing, and the scattering. Rotation's not going to, well, let's randomize that too. Why not? So each thing has a different way it's working with things. So the size is based on 100% of the size. I actually want to go pretty small. And I'm not going to see what it looks like until I actually made the brush. And then I'm going to come back and edit the brush. So I don't know. I'm trying that. 21 to 48%, 50%. Depends on the size of your original. Spacing. Let's see. This is the spacing between them based on 100% of the size of the object. So I don't know. We'll come back and change that later. Scattering. Scattering is left and right of the path that the brush paints. And rotation is based on degrees. I want to randomize that. Alright, so I'm going to move this off the side for now. And get the brush tool, B for brush. I got that brush selected that I just made. It's a scatter brush. And what a scatter brush does is I'm just going to draw a spiral. You can draw it whatever you want, however shape you want to get it. Now this brush would normally make a line, but because we did this, it made this scattering shape here. I got some parts of the sky that don't have stars in them. It's kind of a bummer, so let's equalize the star setup. So I can choose these individual points. Oops. Get the direct selection tool. I've got the direct selection tool. Let's lock that layer where the background is. So here's this. There's that shape. There we go. So I just want to move this around, just so I get stars everywhere in the sky. No part of the sky should be without stars. Sure, that might work. Now, let's get back and edit that brush, because I feel like some of the stars are too big. So if I choose Preview, and I randomize the size, so lean towards smaller, and I can choose Preview, that's Preview selected, and let's get something smaller still. So the different sizes is because they're, gosh, stars are different distances away. They are themselves different sizes. So I just want to get a sky that looks sort of believable, you know. So I got that. So spacing, let's try that. So if I change the spacing with less spacing, it puts more stars, and with more spacing, it puts less stars. So once you build your sky for this, you can kind of mess around with it a whole bunch. And we're not going to see constellations because this is totally random. And scattering them left and right of the path. Let's bring them closer to the path, perhaps. I don't know. So if they're right on the path, they'll be pretty close. And you can see that. So we want to scatter these hither and yon. There's a whole range of expression between almost 1,000% on each direction that they might travel. So, gosh, let's add more stars by reducing the spacing, randomness. Okay, and the rotation we already got, and that looks okayish. I'm not totally bummed out with it. Let's apply that to the strokes. We made the changes. You could, of course, edit this some more by changing the path. You could do lots of stuff. You could draw it again, in fact. Rather than trying to fix what you have to be exact, you could just then get in there with the brush and do it again with any sort of random pattern you choose. So now I've got two paths of stars, and we can lock that layer. I'm going to close the brush panel. So now the planets. Planets are a good time. Let's lock the sky, open the planets layer, and of course we're going to use like a ellipse. Yes. Where's my ellipse tool? I think it might be there, but it might not be. Nope, that's not it. Oh, star. There it is. Haha. My shape tool section. So I'm going to choose the ellipse tool. I'm going to set it to white for now. So as we talk about, it's not working. What am I doing wrong? I'm on a layer that's locked. That's the problem. So this shape here, we're going to work with a few different things here. And when we're done, you can scatter these around your sky and make them different sizes. So the first one, I'm going to work with a real simple gradient. And if I click on the gradient down here, it's going to give me the default, which I made before, which is the blue and white. Let's go to black and white. So this is linear. And again, I can slide the slider over here to change what that looks like. And you can see it looks really too linear. So for a planet, we want to go radial. And I'm going to get rid of the pure black out of there. And I'm dragging them to get rid of them. And let's open this part up and change it to a little less gray. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you select the gradient tool, you'll see this little thing show up there in the middle. So that is my gradient tool controller thing. So what I'm going to do with this is there's a few notches on this. This one here squishes it. Not what I want this time. This one here makes it bigger. Why would I do that? Well, I'm going to take this and move this. You can actually edit the gradient right there on the thing. But I just want to move, oops. Just want to move this whole thing. So if I move the whole thing like this, that gives me a little bit more of a round and maybe unpredictable shape. And I can squish this again to get sort of a feel like that. Let's move this gradient panel out of the way. And I can rotate this thing around. So there's a rotator. There we go. The cursor changes to sort of suggest what I've gotten to. So that looks kind of planetary. And again, we're going to be kind of zoomed all the way out. We can still edit that if we want to. Change the colors, whatever. So that gives me a basic planet with sort of a curvature to the gradient. Now we're going to try a different one here. And you may have seen some pictures of the night sky. Not a bad idea to look one up. So if I look one up and I search on Google for planets, there's actually a hip hop group in England called the Planets. Look them up sometime. I know a guy that made a music video for them that was anime. Okay, Jupiter has all these weird stripes going on with it. Now we're not going to get perfectly turbulent like that. That's actually a gas planet. It's a gas giant. And we have a variety of other expressions we could use for planets. We're going to keep it pretty simple for now. So Saturn has pretty simple patterns in it. So let me just move that out of the way and go back to my gradient panel. And let's start with white and black. And we're going to just change my gradients. This time we're going to, again, go radial. But we're going to add a bunch of stops in here. So just add some stops. And I'm just going to add some different shades in here. So this one here, I'm going to open it up. And it always opens CMYK, which drives me crazy. So I'm going to go to HSB. I'm going to go with sort of a red or hue, like a reddish tone. That looks okay. Let me open this one up. And this one I'm going to go with more of a, again, I got to go to HSB. And this one I'm going to go with more of a, who knows, a yellowish. Sure, that'll work. Back to HSB again. So I'm going piece by piece. And I'm not actually going for a circular piece, but I'm going to use these stripes as we did with the other one to sort of create a curvature to the shape. So again, I'm in HSB. I'm going to pick a color again. So I don't know what causes these plants to have these tones to them or these colors, but let's just build this up, and it's possible you could use a eyedropper to pick that color, but I'm not sure how that works within this panel. So good. Let's get this one back in there to yellowish or something. And let's drop the saturation. All right, and that'll make it a little more realistic. So I can also move these sliders here. Okay, so as you can see, that changes. If I bring it all the way close, it makes the cut point less gradiented, less gradated, and more tight. So we're going to move these around to get this set up. And again, you can pick your own colors, but you should be working from the HSB panel. So last one I did was yellow. I'm going to go back to like a brown. Now brown is a shade of red, but it's very unsaturated. Okay, so I want to really lose the saturation on that. And it's sort of between red and yellow. So I'm trying to get colors that I might see on an actual planet. Like, I've never been to one, but you know, I've been to this one. Earth is okay so far. We're, we're working on it. So let me go back to yellow-ish. So I got some other tones in here. And we want to avoid full-on like psychedelia on these colors. You want to have it look like an actual planet, not some bad dream that somebody had. So let's open HSB again, and that last one is sort of a, let's go with a yellow or a brown or something like this. So I'm going to bring that up. And the last one, and again, pick your own colors. Do your own thing. But I am working from this end of the sales things. And that looks good. Now, this is not what I want. Okay? Not at all. But I'm going to zoom it down, or I'm going to move it down, because I'm going to use the gradient tool like this to make that bigger. I can squish it down. And I lost most of my colors, but I'm going to move them back into place this way. And now I have most of my colors represented and an okay looking planet. So again, using the gradient tool, if I adjust this, squish it, okay, move that down, move the whole thing, trying to figure out which one of these things moves it around is kind of tough sometimes for me, but I should be able to grab some. There we go. Move that down, and that looks pretty nifty. And so try things out with that. Make some planets, and next class I'm going to show you how to add some effects to make them look more like, let's see, Venus has this like fire thing going on. Venus is kind of closer to the sun. The only one closer to the sun than Venus is Mercury. So Venus, I'm not sure why it has all those colors, but it looks like fire. So there's a way to add that in vector technology as well. So what I want you to do is make up several planets. I'm going to come back to you in a second to show you how mine looks. Alright, so here's some planets I came up with using different amounts of gradients. This one here is actually a standard gradient that's already set up in there using orange and yellow. I just repeated the colors and added some stuff in there, and it's pretty tonally consistent in terms of its hues. This one has lots of different hues and values across it, and this one here just uses a couple. This one here is almost plain completely here, and as we had earlier, this one here is. Now we're going to change these up using the selection tool and shift. So we should pick one that's going to be the closest, and I'm going to bring this closest and move it up. So I'm going to make it larger. I can rotate it by moving to the corners and doing this. I can rotate it the other way if I want to. I don't know what really feeds into these decisions other than just kind of pure, let's try this. So let me move this over here, and eventually I got to work with some overlapping. So if that one's smaller, presumably it might be farther away. It might not be. It might just be a smaller planet. You never know. But let's move these around and create some sense of depth and spin. I'm using shift to maintain my sizes or my proportions. So I don't want to have it go like this, so I use shift to prevent that awful possibility. So let's just put a few closer like this, and that sort of works. I really want that to be tilted, maybe the other way, I don't know. So double click the hand to zoom out, and it looks okay. So work on building some planets up. Next class I'm going to show you how to use gradients and transparencies to develop a sort of a planetary surface that'll be used in a game next semester. Okay, so try some stuff out, have some fun with this, work with your colors, and peace out.